insist on doing so.
Makes sense. When we first started, you told us that provisionals are a 1-year placeholder. Utility patents are 20 years. Design, you said, were 14. What are
They're going up to 15 in a year, actually.
15? Okay. And what is the time that you have when you are issued a trademark and a copyright?
A trademark is good indefinitely so long as it functions as a source indicator, and we're back to that word. So long as the consuming public recognizes your trademark for your brand name, it can exist forever. Coca-Cola's been around for hundreds of years. In terms of copyright, as it stands for works that were created after 1978, it's life of the author plus 70.
Okay.
70 years. So
okay.
Long time. Long time for copyrights and trademarks.
Yep. So, Beth, are all these necessary? Do people always have to register their patents and trademarks and copyrights, or are they inherently given the right to use their art or product or whatever it is?
Well, that's a complex question because it depends on the area, and I'm not a patent litigator. I don't litigate those, so I'm going to bring it back into our copyright and trademark discussion. For trademarks, you can have what we call unregistered rights, which means that they can exist at what we call common law. And we can also have a difference between a federal right, which is where we actually apply with the trademark office, and you can also have a state-based right, where you file with your Secretary of State and you say, I have a trade name in this state. And for those, there are rights and remedies in terms of an infringement suit. If somebody starts to use your trademark despite it not being federally registered or even state registered. Now, federal registration is naturally stronger. It's stronger than state, and state is stronger than common law, but those rights are still there. Now, with copyright, one of the most common misunderstandings I see is people think that you automatically have registered rights because people say, you always hear copyright attaches the moment something is created, and the language is the moment it's fixed in a tangible medium, meaning that it's captured somewhere where it's not going to evaporate or disappear soon. Now, with copyright, it's a little different because if you have an unregistered mark, you still have a copyright, but your rights are very, very, very limited. If you don't have a federally registered copyright, number one thing is that you don't bring an infringement suit. The best you can hope for is an injunction of telling the person who's infringing your work to stop, and you may be able to get some sort of what's called actual damages, which is a very strange calculation of money lost versus money made, and many times these take more time and attorney's fees to figure out than the work is actually worth. But there's an incentive to register copyrights because they're only $35 in a filing fee. And when you're registered as a copyright, this permits any kind of infringement suit. You can get statutory damages and attorney's fees, and I know anybody listening out there have heard about the statutory damages and copyright infringement. That's where that $150,000 mark people hear about comes from. Those are statutory damages, and you have to have a registered copyright to actually ask for those, period. End of story.
Okay.
So I know it's kind of a roundabout, circuitous way of explaining registered versus registered rights. But
that was very good. That was clear, Beth. Thank you. The $35 fee for a copyright, is that, if you're writing a book, is it $35 per page, $35 for the whole thing?
Oh, no, it's for the book, okay. Or for the we call it the work. So it could be a photograph, it could be a movie, it could be a song. With songs, you can protect the lyrics and the music. Your books, you could protect any kind of illustrations or artwork that you may want to put in that book, as well as the overall story, that kind of thing. So, no, they're not going to charge you $35 a page. That would, really incentivize people not to write anything over 2 pages. So.
Yeah. Well, these type of things that inventors hear about, litigation and infringing. You always want to try to avoid them, but just something really simple, Beth. I had a company, and I was actively running it for, at the time, probably about 10 years. And all of a sudden, this attorney writes me a letter that I have to stop using their client's name. I said,
Mm-hmm.
buddy, when did they start using it? He said, a couple years ago. I said, well, I've been using the name for 10 years. I said, I can even show you the time when I registered my domain name, which is really when I started to use my company name. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I don't believe that you have any kind of case here. What do you say to that, Beth? And that also kind of leads me into the internet and domain area
Mm-hmm.
of intellectual property, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. Well, and what you're describing is a very fact-specific scenario. And one of the defenses, when that letter's called a cease and desist,
Right.
And they can be as nasty or as polite as you want them to be. I typically, when I have to write them, go polite. But what you're talking about is that because if you have a state-based, or it sounds like what you had was common law rights because you didn't register your business name with the feds or with your state, you had common law rights. And one of the things that you can do to kind of get yourself out of an infringement argument is to show prior use, and it's very limited. If you have prior use, you'd be stuck with just usually your geographic area, and that's about it. But that's just one of the issues that you have when you come up with a common law trademark suit. And one of the most common things I see when we jump over from our trademarks to our domain and our internet is that more and more and more copyright and trademark are becoming very, very, very prevalent on the internet, especially in terms of your domain name. And one of the most common things I see is that people think that a domain name automatically gives you a trademark, which can be true, but your domain name itself doesn't necessarily function as a trademark. It can, but it's not an automatic granting of trademark rights. It can certainly move towards trademark rights, but it's not an automatic thing as filing an application were. So if, the little example that I jotted down for our dog washing machine, let's say we want a really fanciful trademark, a good one, and I call it Vroof Dog Groomers. And so our website is vroof.com. We would want to use Vroof everywhere, and then you can establish common law rights, but just having Vroof.com doesn't, but not a whole lot. It's there, but we need to have more. Does that answer your question?
Sure. But Beth, on the other side, there was a time where domain names were kind of just everybody was scooping them up, and I scooped up a decent amount of names, and I kind of added maybe a word before a famous name that, a trademark name that people already know. Let's say whatever McDonald's, let's say, and I found myself getting cease and desist letters. And and demands to transfer over the domain name. But I said, wait a second. I heard that domain names are not trademarks, so I can keep it. And, push come to shove, at the end of the day, I was forced to give them and transfer my domain names back to them. Some I earned some money from, and others I just didn't want to bother going into any kind of litigation.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I
And
gave
for
it
our
up.
listening audience, please don't do that. Please
So tell us.
don't do that.
I learned the last.
We're talking about the ACPA right now, and that's the Anti-Cyber Squatting Protection Act. It's coded in 15 U.S.C. You're not allowed to register a domain name for the purpose of making a profit when it consists of somebody else's trademark, okay? So McDonald's, and the more famous the mark you are, or the more famous the mark is, the more trouble you're likely to get into. So, www.disneygoof.com. You don't do that, please.
What about if somebody says, like, I hate Disney.com? Is that's somebody's opinion and that's their right?
That's a little different.
Okay.
That's a little different because we call them your suck sites, like Disney sucks or Coke sucks or I hate Disney or those types of things. You can use another person's trademark for a couple of very, very, very small reasons, and one of them is for commentary. One of them is to make a site saying, Disney is bad and this kind of thing. You're not allowed to be defamatory, so you can't say things that aren't true and defamatory, and we'll get into that later if there's time. But you can use it in a way to where you want to make your voice heard, so long as you're not using it as a source indicator, and so long as you're not trying to piggyback on Disney's goodwill by somehow diverting their customers over into yours. That's one of the accepted uses of another's trademark. And another's is it's called permissive use or nominative fair use. And this you see a lot in mechanics will do this. If you say you have a mechanic shop and you repair Hondas, you're allowed to advertise to your customers that you repair Hondas. You're just not allowed to say, Honda customers come buy a Honda here.
Right.
And create some sort of, and go back to the consumer confusion of, oh, wait a minute, is this guy a Honda dealer now, or is he repairing Hondas? I don't know, and it's all consumer confusion based, if that makes sense.
Sure. Beth, when I come up with an invention, I always like to put a name to it, and I like the intellectual property side of it, and I like the domain name. I feel like I'm putting together a package deal, and that's how you said a lot of people come to you. But I like to take my time in a way. First, even before I start making a prototype, I come up with a name and I kind of keep it to myself. But then I go online and I go to the USPTO.gov website. I go to Trademarks and I put in the name. I see if there's a search button there. You click on Trademarks and you could do a quick search and see what class of goods that name might be taken. But it's very general, right? And then I also go on the website. I go to one of the registrars of domain names. There's GoDaddy, Network Solutions. There's a million and one of them. And then I put in the name there, and I see if it exists or not. And then I also just do a general search on several different websites and just see what comes up on there. Is that good, Beth, or should I do anything else? Any other suggestions?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. It gives you a good indicator of, because I'm sure you've had a word or a name before that you saw that somebody else had and changed your mind. And I call that a clearance search. I do them. You can pay for a really, really expensive one from some of your professional services that do it. But it's a good way for you to decide what your name is. And it's great that you do that, because before you come to your trademark attorney, or before you file it and pay all the filing fees with the government, you actually know kinda if you have a snowball's chance of getting that mark, or if the trademark examining attorney is going to say, I'm sorry, you cannot have McDonald's for your hamburger restaurant, and because there's no refunds for your filing fees. And that's a good way to start. And also remember that a trademark is as strong as it is popular. You want your trademark to be the popular kid at the lunch table. And the way it gets that way is by being used a lot. And so you'll have it, you want your domain name to be your trademark. You want your business name to be your trademark. We'll use Roof. We want Roof LLC, Roof.com, Roof Dog Washing Company. Look at all of these things that we have. Put it on your business cards. Put it on your letterhead. Splat it all over your website, and that way it becomes recognizable. So when people hear Roof, they'll think, that's that dog washing company. Oh my gosh, they're great. I read that guy's book. It was really interesting. Does that make sense?
Sure. What about names, Beth? If I want to say I want to trademark the name Brian Freed, can I do that?
Sometimes.
Okay.
There's the thing in trademark is that because it's tied up in consumer protection, is that we want to make sure when we give somebody a trademark, what we're essentially doing is permitting that person to tell every other human being on the planet that they are not allowed to use that word in connection with their similar goods and services, yeah? And so when it comes to names, there's almost a disincentive to use your name. They're not impossible to do, but there are better trademarks out there, and only if your name is very important to you, or if it's unique, or if it's becoming what we call secondary meaning, or if it's getting famous, is where you really want to start protecting your name. Athletes do it a lot. Celebrities